Most men misunderstand what the word dangerous actually means. They imagine violence, anger, chaos, loud threats. That image is convenient, because it allows them to believe danger is something external, something extreme, something they will never have to confront in themselves. In reality, truly dangerous men are rarely loud, rarely emotional, and almost never impulsive. Their danger doesn't come from rage. It comes from control. A dangerous man is not someone who loses control. He is someone who withholds it. Society is comfortable with emotional men. Emotional men are predictable. They react when provoked, explain when challenged, justify when questioned. Their behavior follows a visible script. You can push them and they will respond immediately. You can insult them and they will defend themselves. You can pressure them and they will reveal exactly where their limits are. That is not danger. That is transparency. Danger begins where transparency ends. The moment a man stops reacting on cue, the environment around him shifts. People become uncertain. They can no longer predict how far they can go. They no longer know which words will trigger a response or which lines will produce submission. This uncertainty is uncomfortable, and discomfort is the first signal of power. A dangerous man is defined by consequence, not expression. He doesn't announce boundaries. He doesn't negotiate respect. He doesn't warn repeatedly. His presence alone changes behavior because people understand, on a subconscious level, that crossing him has a cost. That cost is not emotional drama. It is decisive action. This is why disciplined men are feared more than aggressive ones. Aggression burns fast and exposes itself. Discipline is silent and patient. Aggressive men want to be seen. Dangerous men don't need to be. There is a reason institutions, workplaces, and social systems subtly discourage this kind of masculinity. A man who can control his impulses, detach from approval, and act without emotional leakage is difficult to manage. He doesn't respond to shame. He doesn't respond to praise. He doesn't respond to urgency manufactured by others. He moves on his own timing. That independence is destabilizing. So society reframes danger as something crude and undesirable. It tells you that calm intensity is cold, that restraint is emotional distance, that silence is lack of communication. These labels are not psychological truths. They are social defenses. They exist to pressure men back into predictability. A dangerous man rejects this framing entirely. He understands that power is not about dominance displays. It is about optionality. It is about being able to act, or not act, without being forced. When you cannot be rushed, manipulated, or emotionally hijacked, you become difficult to control. When you stop needing immediate resolution, you gain leverage over those who do. This is the foundation of danger. Restraint paired with capability. Restraint without capability is weakness. Capability without restraint is volatility. But when the two exist together, people adjust themselves around you. Conversations soften. Challenges become cautious. Disrespect becomes calculated instead of casual. Not because you demanded it, but because the environment senses that you are not harmless. Harmless men are easy to deal with. They want to be liked. They want to be understood. They want closure. Dangerous men don't need any of that. They are comfortable with tension. They allow silence to stretch. They let ambiguity exist. And most importantly, they do not rush to relieve discomfort, either their own or anyone else's. This is why danger is internal before it is external. It begins with emotional discipline, with the ability to pause where others panic, with the willingness to let outcomes remain unresolved, with the refusal to leak intention prematurely. Once a man reaches this state, his behavior changes subtly but permanently. He speaks less. He watches more. He chooses responses instead of reacting. He understands that every word, every explanation, every emotional display gives information away. And information is leverage. This chapter is not about becoming threatening. It is about becoming consequential. A dangerous man does not need to prove anything. His presence already suggests that something will happen if lines are crossed. And because that consequence is unclear, people assume the worst. That assumption does more work than any display of force ever could. This is where the transformation begins. Not with aggression, not with bravado, but with discipline, restraint, and the quiet removal of predictability. Once a man is no longer predictable, he is no longer safe to ignore. Silence is not weakness. It is one of the fastest ways to separate harmless men from dangerous ones. Most men speak to manage perception. They explain, clarify, defend, and correct because they are afraid of being misunderstood. They believe that if others don't see their intentions clearly, they will lose control of the situation. What they don't realize is that this instinct exposes them. The moment you rush to explain yourself, you reveal need. Needing to be understood is a dependency. It hands power to whoever is listening. You are asking them to agree with your version of reality. You are signaling that their interpretation matters more than your position. Dangerous men do not make that request. They allow others to interpret freely, and they accept whatever interpretation forms. This is where silence becomes threatening. When you stop explaining yourself, people feel a subtle loss of control. They can no longer guide the narrative by provoking a reaction. They don't know whether you agree, disagree, or are planning something else entirely. The absence of feedback forces them to fill the gap themselves. And humans rarely fill gaps with optimism. They project risk. Silence creates a vacuum. In that vacuum, people expose their insecurities, their assumptions, and their limits. They speak more. They justify themselves. They reveal what they fear. Meanwhile, you learn without giving anything away. Detachment is what makes this possible. A dangerous man is not emotionally attached to being liked, validated, or correctly perceived. He does not chase alignment. He understands that clarity reduces leverage. When people fully understand you, they know how to manipulate you. When they don't, they hesitate. This is why dangerous men are comfortable being misunderstood. They don't correct false narratives unless correction serves a strategic purpose. They don't rush to defend their character. They don't argue their intentions. They let others underestimate them, mislabel them, or even dislike them. Not because they are passive, but because they are patient. Being misunderstood creates space. It lowers expectations. It removes pressure to perform. And most importantly, it gives you freedom to act without explanation later. When people think they know you, they stop watching closely. That is when leverage appears. Most men cannot tolerate this. They feel exposed when their intentions are unclear. They feel anxious when silence stretches. They feel compelled to fill the gap with words. This compulsion is not honesty, it is fear. Fear of losing relevance. Fear of losing control. Fear of being misjudged. Dangerous men train themselves out of this reflex. They understand that words are commitments. Every explanation limits future options. Every justification narrows the field of possible action. Silence keeps options open. Silence keeps authority intact. This doesn't mean they never speak. It means when they do, their words carry weight. Because they are rare. Because they are deliberate. Because they are not reactive. Detachment also protects against emotional manipulation. When you don't need approval, flattery loses power. When you don't fear disapproval, shame stops working. When you don't need to be understood, confusion becomes your ally. People test boundaries through language first. They push with subtle disrespect, veiled challenges, or implied judgments. Harmless men respond verbally. They explain. They justify. They negotiate. Dangerous men respond with stillness. They let the test hang in the air. And in that pause, the tester often retreats on their own. Why? Because uncertainty is more intimidating than confrontation. You can argue with words. You can't argue with silence without revealing yourself. Detachment also means you stop managing others' emotions. You don't rush to make people comfortable. You don't soften your presence to reduce tension. You allow discomfort to exist. And when you are comfortable with discomfort, others feel it more intensely. This is the shift. You stop reacting to the environment and the environment starts reacting to you. Misunderstanding becomes a filter. Those who require constant explanation drift away. Those who respect quiet authority adjust their behavior. You don't need to announce this change. It happens naturally as a consequence of your restraint. Silence. Detachment. Willingness to be misunderstood. These are not social skills. They are power mechanics. When you remove the need to be understood, you remove the need to be managed. And when you can no longer be managed through words, you become difficult to control. This is one of the clearest signs that a man is becoming dangerous. Emotional control is where most men fail, and where dangerous men are separated from the rest. The difference is not that dangerous men feel less. It's that they do not allow emotion to dictate timing. They understand something fundamental. Whoever reacts first usually loses. Most men are ruled by immediacy. They feel disrespected and respond instantly. They feel challenged and escalate. They feel urgency and rush decisions. This makes them easy to read, easy to provoke, and easy to steer. Their emotions announce their next move before they even make it. That is not strength. That is exposure. A dangerous man does not eliminate emotion. He delays it. He feels the same impulses, anger, pride, fear, urgency, but he does not act on them in the moment they arise. He creates distance between stimulus and response. That distance is where power lives. In that pause, he evaluates timing, consequence, and leverage. While others are reacting, he is choosing. Timing is a weapon. Responding too fast gives control to whoever triggered you. It means they set the tempo. Dangerous men refuse to surrender tempo. They slow the interaction down. They let situations breathe. They allow tension to build instead of releasing it for relief. This frustrates people who rely on emotional pressure to get results. Think about how often urgency is manufactured. Deadlines, ultimatums, emotional appeals, social pressure. These are not neutral forces, they are tools. When someone tries to rush you, they are trying to limit your options. They want you to decide before you can see the full board. Dangerous men recognize this immediately. They do not confuse delay with weakness. They understand that waiting is often the strongest move. Not passive waiting, but strategic restraint. The kind that forces others to reveal more, overextend, or make mistakes. Emotional control also changes how conflict plays out. Most conflicts are not decided by intensity. They are decided by endurance. The man who can remain composed while others burn themselves out gains advantage without ever raising his voice. This is why dangerous men appear calm under pressure. Calmness is not personality, it is training. They have practiced not reacting. They have learned that emotional expression is information leakage. The more you show, the more others know how to handle you. Timing applies not just to confrontation but to opportunity. Most men either hesitate too long or jump too early. They act based on fear or excitement instead of readiness. Dangerous men wait until action produces maximum impact. They strike when others are tired, distracted, or overconfident. Not because they are cruel, but because they are precise. This precision creates an unsettling effect. People sense that you are not impulsive. They feel that you are watching, calculating, waiting. This makes them second-guess themselves. They wonder what you see that they don't. Uncertainty creeps in. And uncertainty weakens positions. Emotional discipline also protects you from regret. Rash decisions feel powerful in the moment, but they often close doors permanently. Dangerous men value optionality. They want to keep doors open until the moment closing one creates advantage. That requires patience, and patience requires emotional control. There is also a deeper layer to this: identity. Men who react emotionally are attached to outcomes. They need to win arguments. They need to be right. They need immediate resolution. Dangerous men are attached to position, not ego. They are willing to lose small battles if it strengthens their long-term leverage. They don't need the last word. They need the final advantage. This mindset takes time to build because it goes against instinct. Instinct demands release. Instinct wants action. Discipline says wait. Discipline says observe. Discipline says act when it hurts the other side most, not when it feels good to you. That is why emotional control is rare. And that is why it signals danger. When a man stops reacting emotionally, people notice. Conversations feel different. Provocations fall flat. Pressure loses its effect. The environment realizes that emotional manipulation no longer works. At that point, dynamics shift. People stop pushing. They start calculating. They adjust their behavior around you. Not because you threaten them, but because they can no longer control you through emotion. This is the sign. When your timing is no longer dictated by feeling, urgency, or external pressure, you have crossed a line most men never reach. You are no longer reactive. You are deliberate. And deliberateness paired with capability is dangerous. Validation is one of the most efficient control systems ever created. It doesn't need force. It doesn't need threats. It works because most men are addicted to being seen as good, capable, impressive, or respectable. They measure themselves through reactions: approval, praise, recognition, acceptance. And the moment a man needs validation, his behavior becomes predictable. Dangerous men exit this system completely. They do not reject validation loudly. They simply stop responding to it. Compliments don't accelerate them. Criticism doesn't slow them down. Applause doesn't change their direction. Silence doesn't unsettle them. When validation loses its grip, external control collapses. Most men don't realize how much of their energy is spent performing. They speak to be acknowledged. They work to be noticed. They posture to be respected. Even their discipline is often public, designed to signal worth rather than build leverage. This is why removing validation is so destabilizing. Without an audience, most men don't know how to act. Dangerous men do. They are willing to operate without witnesses. They make decisions that no one applauds. They build capability in isolation. Their confidence doesn't come from feedback, it comes from competence. This is why their presence feels heavier. There is no performative energy, no need to impress, no hunger for reaction. When you stop needing validation, you also stop needing permission. Approval and permission are closely linked. If you want people to agree with you, you will wait for signals before acting. If you don't, you move when it serves you. Dangerous men do not announce plans. They do not seek consensus. They act, then let reality absorb the decision. This is deeply unsettling to environments built on consensus and compliance. The second shift that follows is selectivity. When validation is no longer required, access becomes limited. Dangerous men become selective with where they invest time, attention, and emotion. They no longer explain boundaries. They simply enforce them through absence. Invitations are declined without justification. Conversations are ended without apology. Energy is withdrawn without drama. This selectivity is not arrogance. It is filtration. Every interaction costs something: focus, emotional bandwidth, strategic clarity. Dangerous men protect these resources fiercely. They understand that access is power. Who gets your time gets influence. So they reduce access to increase control. Most men struggle here because they equate availability with value. They believe being needed makes them important. Dangerous men understand the opposite. Scarcity creates value. Distance creates gravity. When you are not always available, people adjust their behavior around you. This changes social dynamics quickly. People begin to prepare before interacting with you. They become concise. They avoid unnecessary friction. They respect time because they sense it is limited. You don't demand this behavior. You create it by refusing to overextend. Selectivity also sharpens perception. When your social circle shrinks, noise disappears. You see patterns more clearly. You detect manipulation faster. You stop confusing familiarity with loyalty. Dangerous men prefer a small number of controlled relationships over a wide network of weak ones. This is why they appear isolated to outsiders. But isolation is not loneliness when it is chosen. It is positioning. Validation-seeking men fill space with people. Dangerous men fill space with leverage. They are comfortable being less visible because visibility often comes at the cost of control. When everyone knows what you're doing, they also know how to interfere. Dangerous men don't advertise progress. They let outcomes speak. The combined effect of validation exit and selectivity is subtle but powerful. You become harder to read, harder to access, harder to influence. Others begin to feel that interactions with you have weight, that your attention must be earned, that your presence is not guaranteed. This is not cruelty. It is clarity. When you stop needing validation, you stop negotiating your value. When you become selective, you stop wasting power on environments that don't deserve it. Together, these shifts mark a clear transition, from social participant to strategic operator. And once a man reaches this point, returning to performative behavior feels impossible, because he has tasted freedom from approval. And freedom, once experienced, makes a man dangerous. Walking away is one of the most misunderstood signals of power. Most men interpret departure as loss, retreat, or weakness. They believe staying proves commitment, loyalty, or strength. In reality, the opposite is often true. The man who can walk away holds leverage. The man who cannot is already negotiating from a position of need. Dangerous men are willing to leave situations that no longer serve them, without drama, without ultimatums, without explanation. This willingness changes everything. Most power dynamics exist because one side cares more than the other. One side needs the outcome, the approval, the relationship, the position. The other side senses this imbalance and exploits it, consciously or not. When you are unwilling to walk away, you are communicating dependence. And dependence invites pressure. Dangerous men eliminate this vulnerability. They do not threaten to leave. They simply make it clear, through behavior, not words, that staying is a choice, not a requirement. They invest fully when conditions are aligned, and they disengage cleanly when they are not. This creates a psychological asymmetry. Others begin to realize that access to you is conditional, not guaranteed. Walking away is not emotional. It is strategic. It requires clarity about value. Dangerous men know what they bring to a situation: skill, stability, capability, presence. Because they know this, they are not afraid of absence. They understand that removal of value is often more powerful than confrontation. Silence and distance force recalibration. Most men stay too long. They argue. They negotiate. They try to fix what no longer respects them. This behavior trains others to push harder, to test limits further, to assume tolerance. Dangerous men do not teach people how far they can be pushed. They remove themselves before that lesson is learned. This applies across environments, relationships, workplaces, social hierarchies. In relationships, walking away communicates self-respect more clearly than any boundary speech ever could. You don't need to explain standards to someone who already crossed them. Departure is the standard. It reframes the dynamic immediately. The other person is forced to confront the cost of their behavior. In professional settings, the willingness to walk away from bad deals, disrespectful roles, or misaligned environments signals abundance. It tells others that you are not trapped, that you have options, that you will not sacrifice position for security. This alone often triggers better terms, increased respect, or a shift in behavior, without you asking. In social hierarchies, walking away removes you from low-value games. Dangerous men do not compete for attention in crowded arenas. They leave spaces where the rules are stacked against them and position themselves where their strengths matter. This selectivity amplifies perceived value. Scarcity is not manufactured by pretending to be unavailable. It is created by actually being willing to go. This is where most men fail. They try to signal indifference while remaining emotionally invested. That inconsistency is visible. Dangerous men are consistent. When they disengage fully. No checking back. No monitoring reactions. No seeking validation through absence. This consistency is what makes walking away powerful. It removes uncertainty about your resolve. There is also a deeper psychological shift that happens here. When you become willing to walk away, fear loses its grip. Fear of loss. Fear of rejection. Fear of instability. You realize that most situations are not as fragile as they appear, and that some are not worth preserving at all. This detachment produces calm. And calm unnerves people who rely on emotional leverage. They expect resistance, pleading, negotiation. When they receive distance instead, they are forced into introspection or escalation. Either way, you gain information. You see who respects you and who only tolerated you while you were compliant. Dangerous men accept this outcome. They understand that not all doors should remain open. Some doors exist to test whether you have the strength to close them. Walking away also reinforces internal authority. Each time you choose self-respect over comfort, your identity shifts. You begin to trust yourself more. You stop doubting your instincts. You stop bargaining with situations that drain you. This internal alignment makes future decisions easier and faster. Over time, people sense this. They interact with you more carefully. They measure their words. They consider consequences. Not because you demanded it, but because they know you are willing to leave. This is the power of scarcity and exit control. When staying is optional, every interaction changes. When walking away is possible, pressure reverses direction. When you are not afraid of loss, you become difficult to manipulate. And a man who cannot be manipulated is no longer safe to take lightly. That is why the willingness to walk away is one of the clearest signs a man is becoming dangerous. Fear is often misunderstood. People imagine it as intimidation, aggression, or loud dominance. That is not the kind of fear dangerous men create. The fear surrounding a dangerous man is quieter, colder, and far more effective. It is not fear of violence, it is fear of consequence. This is the final shift. When a man becomes dangerous, people don't fear his reactions. They fear his restraint. They fear what happens after they cross a line, not in the moment but later when he decides it matters. This type of fear doesn't come from threats. It comes from consistency. Most men want to be liked. They soften their behavior to maintain harmony. They compromise boundaries to preserve approval. They mistake popularity for influence. In doing so, they train people to disrespect them gradually because there is no cost attached. Dangerous men make a different trade. They choose respect over comfort. And respect often arrives wrapped in caution. When people know that crossing you has consequences, not emotional outbursts, not arguments, but decisive withdrawal or action, they begin to calculate. They choose words more carefully. They hesitate before testing limits. They think twice before taking advantage. This is not hatred. This is awareness. Being feared in this sense does not mean being disliked. It means being taken seriously. The moment people stop feeling free to treat you casually, your position changes. Casual disrespect disappears. Jokes are measured. Challenges are indirect. Even disagreement becomes polite. You didn't demand this shift. You earned it by becoming someone who does not tolerate erosion. This is where many men struggle psychologically. They confuse fear with cruelty. They worry that being feared means being isolated. In reality, the opposite often happens. People who respect strength align themselves with it. What disappears are opportunists, manipulators, and those who relied on your tolerance to extract value. That is not loss. That is filtration. Dangerous men understand that being universally liked is not a sign of strength. It is often a sign of accessibility. And accessibility invites exploitation. When people feel entitled to you, they push. When they sense limits, they adjust. Fear, in this context, is simply the recognition that you are not safe to disrespect. This fear is built slowly. It is built through follow-through, through consistency, through restraint, through the quiet enforcement of standards. Dangerous men do not explain these standards. They demonstrate them. And once demonstrated, repetition is unnecessary. This is why dangerous men don't need to dominate conversations or assert authority constantly. Their reputation does the work for them. People speak about them differently when they are not present. Not with admiration necessarily, but with caution. And caution is influence. At this stage, identity locks in. You are no longer trying to become something. You are no longer seeking approval or transformation. Your behavior has reshaped how others respond to you. The environment now reinforces your position instead of challenging it. This is when men stop reverting to old patterns, because returning to harmlessness feels unnatural. Harmless men chase validation. Dangerous men allow consequence. Harmless men react. Dangerous men decide. Harmless men explain. Dangerous men act. This is the final distinction. Once people begin to calculate around you, once they adjust their behavior before engaging with you, you have crossed into a different category. You are no longer managed socially. You are accounted for strategically. This does not make you loud. It makes you solid. It does not make you popular. It makes you undeniable. And it does not make you violent. It makes you consequential. Most men will never reach this point because it requires sacrifice. You lose comfort. You lose approval. You lose the illusion of safety that comes from blending in. But what you gain is sovereignty, the ability to move through the world without being shaped by other people's expectations. That is what it means to become dangerous. Not feared for chaos, but respected for control. If this series resonates with you, if you recognize these shifts happening internally, then this channel is being built for you. Subscribe to Mindstrict and continue the transformation.